Yo, how are you doing, folks? Welcome to episode 102 of the Simpa Life Podcast. We're getting dark days, dingy. I don't know where you are in the world where you're viewing from. I hope you're getting more than 5 minutes of sunlight, which is what it feels like to me up in the north of England right now. But hey ho, I'm not going to complain too much because we've got some beautiful guests lined up over the coming weeks to keep it bright and sunny. So I think we'll loosely segue into today's guest because it has been actually quite a quiet week in weed, really. A lot has gone on in the US, which we're going to discuss shortly with our guest. But I suppose around the world, there's a really interesting story that I'm going to include in the link below just because of how hilarious it is. Police officers in India claim that up to 500 kilograms of cannabis has been eaten by rats. As a way to account for a disparaging in their numbers and accounting. So quite interesting, a story we want to keep an eye on, because if they get away with that, I'm quite interested to see how many other police forces around the world claim that rodent infestations ate their cannabis. But hey ho. Segueing on to today's guest, they are a New Jersey-born cannabis enthusiast and breeder who grew up in the 1980s in the New York cannabis scene before starting to grow himself in the 1990s, and then moving on to start experimenting, breeding, and stabilizing his own genetics in the early 2000s, including Trey's Dog, the notorious, as it is in the UK, Star Dog, I-95, the original New York City Diesel, which we will discuss the O on that shortly as well, to name but a few. They're a member of the Higb Times Breeders Hall of Fame, a genetic consultant for Verde Natural, and the founder of the multi-award-winning and legendary top Dawg Seeds. They are JJ NYC. I'll introduce you because I don't know if I'm supposed to use your name. Should have checked that with you.
That's fine. Thanks for having me.
No worries, brother. No worries. Been looking forward to this conversation for quite a while. I've been aware of your work as a breeder, as a consumer, I suppose, on my side of it for quite a while. In recent years, become more aware of the diversity of the genetics that yourself has been involved with. And really quite interested to hear your story and find out how things like Star Dog came to be, how your legendary Nigerian haze, I think there's a lot here to discuss. So I think if you don't mind, can we jump all the way back to how this started? And would you mind letting us know how and when you first got involved with cannabis?
Well, I mean, if you want to start from the very beginning, I first smoked when I was 13 years old. And that was probably in the late 70s, probably in 79 that was. I was in seventh grade at the time. I didn't really become a everyday smoker till I was a freshman in high school a couple of years later. And that was probably 1980. That's when I really started smoking. I like to refer to that time as the Cheech and Chong era, because back then there was mostly import sativas from Mexico, from Colombia. You would see the occasional Thai stick or Thai weed. You would see some Hawaiian occasionally, but those things were, very high priced at the time. So as a young high schooler, it was very hard to be able to experience some of those things. But I usually hung around with the older crowd. So just in that, they would pass you a joint or whatever, and you would be able at least to smoke a little bit of it. I might not have been able to afford to buy it at the time, but like I said, when you were in these big groups of kids, 10 or 20 kids, and everyone's smoking weed and passing around joints and stuff, you get to try a lot of different things. And so just moving fast forward, in high school, I started selling cannabis a little bit, and pretty much to the end of high school. Leading out of that is when I really got involved in the New York City scene. A friend of mine from town had gone into the Washington Square Park, bumped into some kids that brought him to a spot. And we just started going to that spot, ever since then. And then just really networking the New York City scene, getting to know different people, eventually winding up in Central Park in 1992. And I guess that's really where my story really begins, I guess. because that's where I really met the people that were involved in the Chem Dog. I had met the Weasel up there, and I started selling for him exclusively, and just expanding from there. Getting into growing a little bit. But just going back a little bit, as a seller, I would, these guys were growing it and I was selling it, So I had, a very, close relationship with my customers. They would, I always, use their feedback to tell the growers what to grow, what was working, what wasn't working. And so I, once the Chem Dog came out I would say it was probably like 1992, 1993 is when the first time I saw Chem Dog. And when people saw it, they were just, they just went ballistic. And, and that was the original diesel. Back then, people just called good weed diesel. And so, we used to have the Chem Dog, and I remember showing someone, and he's like, "What is this?" I called it. Yeah, it's a Chem Dog. He's like, "Oh, it's grown with chemicals, something. It's not organic, blah blah blah." So we tried to get away from using the chem name and really called it. We would call it the Dog or the original diesel. And that's kind of, a lot of those names kind of stuck around and are used for different strain names now, because they were just kind of catch names. And, back then names weren't as relevant as they are today, So, yeah, so my friend, the Weasel, he started giving me tips on how to grow and stuff. And it was right around this time when the internet, it was really just getting started. And, we had the Overgrow site, and, I was at my spot, and when my customer comes in and he's like, "Oh, did you see the sour diesel online?" And he was telling me about this form and all, and it was just like, I never, knew anything about it before. So, I hop online and, get on Overgrow and just started to see, what was going on there and the different people that were involved. The exchange of information was incredible because, you could have a guy in the UK like yourself talking to someone like me in the States, and you're showing me your grow, I'm showing you my grow, and we're comparing notes and trying to figure out problems and just trying to move the whole movement forward, and so we really started our own little online community, and that's where I really started to get the interest of doing some breeding. And when I first started doing the breeding, it really wasn't really intentional to be like, "Oh, I'm going to be a breeder," or, I just knew that we had these really good strains. And in the past, we had lost a lot of them, and I was just the dealer, and I would be like, well, what happened to that Kush you guys had? "Oh, we lost it." And I was like, man, people keep asking for that stuff. You know what I mean? And so, that had happened a few times. And I was just like, listen, man, I'm just going to start making some seeds. If I'm able to get these strains, these cuttings in my hand, I just want to make some type of representation of them. And so that's really what, got me interested in breeding in the beginning, was just a real preservation of the strains, because I always felt like, if you have a Chem Dog and, whatever you cross into it, if you can come out like 80 to 70% Chem Dog, that's a home run. It doesn't have to be exactly Chem Dog, but if it has some type of Chem Dog in it or whatever, and all that comes down to genetics, and, it becomes quite, complicated in trying to, duplicate something to the exact, an exact duplicate. So, I just started, so I started making seeds, and I moved over to IC Mag, because that's when Overgrow, that whole bus went down. I mean, when that happened, I actually got freaked out. I stayed offline for about a year and then found out that everyone was trickling over to IC Mag, which I did. Then eventually getting on their seed site, and they were running auctions and all this different stuff, and so I started making seeds and sending them in. And the only way that you were able to get paid back then was you could get seed credit, in the seed bank, or they wanted to send you an international bank transfer from the UK, and that just totally freaked me out. So I was just like, well, I can go through all these. I can go through the list of seeds of what they have, and there's a lot of packs that I'd like to have or whatever. So I just started selling seeds and getting the seed credit and buying greenhouse and Sensi and Soma and a lot of the Dutch guys, and that's really where what was really offered at the time. That was what was most popular at the time, and so I just started getting some of those seeds, and as people started growing out my seeds, and really the very first release I think was Trez Dog and the Star Dog. And really, the Star Dog is really kind of like what took off, got noticed at first. I had a friend that was, he was in contact with the Higb Times magazine. And so I had given him a pack of Star Dog, which he had given to Kyle Cushman. And then Kyle Cushman moved out to California. And I think it was maybe in 2010 that they had one of the first medical cups in San Francisco. And I believe Star Dog placed second. So that was really kind of what really got the ball rolling on that. And, needless to say, it isn't really what I did with the seeds and stuff. It's what other people did with it. I mean, I made them, I sold them, but other people grew them out. Other people made the strain famous. When something's that good, it kind of, the cream rises to the top. People take notice, and it wasn't any kind of promotion or marketing or anything like that. It just, good weed takes a life of its own. Any connoisseur can look at something and be able to recognize that something is special. And I'm like that myself. I'm a connoisseur first and foremost. I love to smoke good weed. I like different varieties of weed, but I like high quality. In today's world, it seems like marketing comes first, because I feel like most of the customers out there are younger and haven't really experienced the full genetic pool like I have. I mean, I've been smoking, I'm 56 years old. I told you I started smoking when I was 13. That's 43 years, so I've seen everything that's been around. I think I have a really good, insight of what's out there, and there's always something that could be out, some old hippie up in the mountains might be holding on to something, whatever. But, for the most part, like, the genetic pool, what we have is what we have, unless you're really going to start going backwards into getting into land races, getting into, older genetics, building blocks, and stuff like that. And so I just have a real passion for good weed, and so I just like to have the best of the best, really, and try to I want to also offer my experiences to other people, experiences with the Chem Dog, with the Sour Diesel, with the hazes, all of that. I've been lucky enough to have people share with me, give me these strains, and I've been able to work them, and I'm really trying to, get those genetics out for everyone to experience.
Yeah, man. That's beautiful. It is beautiful. I've had many guests on here. I've not had that many breeders so far, but it's always wonderful to hear somebody doing something truly from passion. Do you know what I mean? Truly from love. And I think that shows in the quality of the genetics of yours that I've seen. Obviously, I agree with what you're saying in that breeder does so much work in terms of producing the seed. Then the expression is down to, you know, the maximization of the environment by the cultivator and put their love that's put into it. So Star Dog's obviously, as you say, taken on a life of its own. I think there's 4 or 5 recognized different cuts of the original sort of Star Dog. And then obviously people have bred like Guava, Illuminati, I think there's White Dog, all sorts of different varieties. How do you feel as sort of the progenitor of Star Dog? And so I've always wondered how breeders feel. I mean, you're creating something obviously for the world, but then when others kind of come along and then add more to it.
Yeah, I don't really, I don't have a problem, people using my genetics and doing any kind of work that they want to do with it. What I don't like is people just taking my genetics like a Star Dog and remaking Star Dog and just trying to make money off of my Star Dog or Guava or whatever it may be. I've used other people's genetics, but I've never copied them. I've always used it as a building block into something else to further the genetics. That's one thing that with the feminizing thing, I think it's useful, but I think overall long-term generational perspective, it's not really that beneficial, because you're kind of bottlenecking genetics together. And what I find what makes genetics blossom is being able to bring 2 different things together and then making one thing that's better than both.
Yeah, entirely. And you touch on a really interesting point there. I've been working with a couple of sort of genetic companies out in working in mostly in Pakistan, but also in sort of the tribal regions around Afghanistan and suppose Kurdistan, even though it's not recognized, but sort of in those kind of regions. And they've discovered that the traditional growing techniques is they keep males around, as they term it, to motivate the females. And so there is this thing of almost, in the crudest of terms, you're sexually frustrating these crops when you're producing these female monocrops. And then with the cyclical cloning, obviously we have genetic drift or whatever they term it these days. But I think there is something there. It's quite pseudoscientific what I'm describing here, but conceptually, I think there is an idea to it. And I've seen it when you have a random hermaphrodization in a grow tent, and all of a sudden there's pollen. Ladies, they perk up around. They want to catch the pollen, obviously. So you end up with a denser trichome production and a better expression of the plants. I just thought it was something quite interesting that you mentioned there.
Yeah, no, it's called hybrid vigor, really. And it's really trying to, when the progeny is better than both parents. And that was kind of the case with the Star Dog, actually, where, the Star Dog actually became better than the Chem 4 and, the Tray Dog male that I used for it. Because that, both of those, the Tray Dog male was Afghani Chem D back cross. And really, I made that male specifically to use for breeding. When I did start breeding, like I had explained earlier about losing these genetics and stuff, I was under the mindset that we have all of these clone-only strains around us, Chem Dog, Sour Diesel, whatever, but we don't have no males. We have no comparable males. These were, kind of like what you were saying, these were bag seed. There was really, I don't know, no one really knows the real genetic, makeup behind all of that stuff. So, I was always of the mindset that, I wanted to create my own male. And, at the time, the Chem D was the strongest strain that I had, not knowing that it'd have the prominence and stature that it does today. Back then, I didn't know the genetic pool as well. Now, 20 something years later, we're able to trace a lot of these things back to the original sources in some cases. And, a lot of this is just possible through the internet and exchange of information and all of that stuff. So, just trying to, use all that information and make a mail, and then started to use that mail. And like I said, tried to get some kind of original representation of the original clone. And so that was really what my mindset of that was going in is, we don't have no males. I'm just going to create my own male with the best weed THC wise that I have. And it's just, like I said, took a life of its own with the different successful breedings that I've had with that male.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. So you started this around sort of the early 2000s. Obviously, Stardog, by the time it sort of really took a hold of the UK, was more later on past 2012 sort of region. Well, I mentioned the 2010 thing, and that was really kind of what got that noticed. And then 2 years later, and that's kind of how it is. Things pop off here, and then eventually kind of, word makes its way around, and like I said, it just takes a life of its own, and before you know it, it's across the pond. Yeah, it's an interesting analogy, I suppose, in the release of films. When I was a kid, something would be released in the cinema in America, and it'd be like, oh, great, 6 months, we'll have it in our cinema. And then it'd be released on video, and you're like, oh yeah, 8 months, we'll have it on video or whatever. And now it's seamless. And the same is true, I suppose, thanks to the multifaceted nature of social media and the internet.
I think things move a lot faster now. Yeah, things move a lot faster now than they did back then.
Yeah, for sure. So it's almost real time. We have a phenomenon here in the UK called UK Cali, which is a marketing brand term by some vendors and dealers to describe American genetics grown in the UK, which is quite farcical, obviously, when you think about it, because we don't then say, oh, well, this is Afghan UK, or this is, Lebanese UK, this is whatever. It's an oddity that's kind of arisen. But I did discover when I was in America in 2018 that some of the UK genetics are actually quite well sought after in the States. Is there anything that sort of yourself has ever been after? I mean, I know because of the same sort of problems, we lost some of the original sort of blue cheese, the original UK cheese. There are obviously, again, representations that have been reconstituted. Without getting too controversial, there's maybe a few breeders claiming they've got originals of things that they maybe don't. But yeah, I'm just curious, is there a market for sort of legacy, old school UK in the States at the minute?
I know that the cheese is probably the most popular UK strain in America. I've used it on a few different breedings myself. It definitely has something to it, But getting back to your Cali remark, and because Cali here, when you say Cali weed in America, it's almost like you're saying commercial. You're referring to commercialized weed, and I'm just wondering if that's the same, in the UK or not.
It is, but it's got such a markup on it. It's an oddity because I met farmers when I was in Mendocino that talked me through the process of wasting weed. So this box fails a test because of lead or whatever else. It's then put in the bin. They fill out the paperwork. They get tax back on it, whatever, and then that then disappears. So we're flooded with imported weed as well, but it's stuff that then isn't legal to sell in the markets it's produced in. So Canada's another one that's starting to saturate the world because, as Steve D'Angelo said when we had him on the podcast the other month, about 80% of their market is going in the bin. They can't sell it because it doesn't meet standard. But they're still trying to recoup the losses, and obviously illicit cannabis then becomes illicit. So it's weird that loose Cali is sold for sometimes 35 quid a gram, And then again, people are buying packs from China, like Mylar bags. You get a big box full of Mylar bags. You buy your Ecuador loose Cali that smells like whatever. You don't know what it is sometimes. You just then put it in a bag with whatever you label it. And it's exactly what you said before about that younger and younger market. They're being told that's what good cannabis looks like. It comes in a Mylar bag. A few years ago, they were told it came in tuna tins, and everyone was buying cannabis in tuna tins.
Well, this is my theory on the Mylar bag. When you're just think about it. When you're on Instagram, what are you doing? You're doing this, right? You're scrolling, right? You're scroll until you see something that's like this, bing, right? All of a sudden you stop because something jumps out at you, and you might like the picture, and then you might make a comment on it, And it's the same thing when you're driving down the highway. All of a sudden, there's a billboard off to the right. There's, a woman scantily clothed. That's going to catch your eye right away. And so cannabis has become visual now, and the marketing is taking advantage of that. So when you got a nice Mylar bag and it's got this, Kim Kardashian or whoever celebrity or, and so it's really not about the substance. It's more about the marketing. And I'm all about substance. I sell my weed in regular plastic bags and, well, I don't sell weed anymore, but, that's the way we used to do things. This whole, Mylar marketing thing, I kind of get it, but on the other hand, it's about what's in the bag, not what's outside of the bag.
Yeah, and to me, it feels like a form of placation and submission or kowtowing, I suppose, down to authorities that have made the system. They don't want you to look or smell your cannabis. They want you to go and buy it based on the brand in the same way that you do alcohol. Whereas most people from legacy that have an experience, you go to your dealer and he has jars and you get to put your face in it and you get to touch it and, oh, yeah, you can break it up. Oh, cheers. Yeah, you can really get to experience it. And then because once you smell it, the nose is a powerful thing in humans, and you can sense the tones on the different layers of your nose. And once you've consumed enough cannabis, you can certainly go, oh, that's a wake and bake for me. That's something that'll really wake me up. Or you go, oh, that'll put me down. And you start to have that intimate relationship with cannabis, but you denied it in the commercial market because they don't want you to touch it.
Well, a lot of that comes with experience, and, if you don't have the experience, then you're not going to know. And then that's how you get taken advantage of.
Very true. Very true. This is something I worry about with the edibles and vape markets and things like that, is that if the companies are not confident enough to sell the flower where people can know what a good quality flower looks like. Whereas, vape carts for convenience, et cetera, I understand it, but I just worry that capitalists that have ran the world forever, that have taken over the emerging cannabis industry, their business practices typically, right, but not exclusively, unscrupulous.
Right, and that's the difference between legacy and commercial. Commercial is just price point fixated. It's a business, and when you scale up, and when you work and you see in some of these warehouses what goes on. A lot of stuff. You can't do the same thing in a huge room that you can in a small craft room. The amount of work. And it's impressive. You look on IG and you see some of these big greenhouse grows, or acres and acres, and they're huge. But what else is huge is their problems, because once they have a bug infestation or powdery mildew or whatever the problem may be, all of that is just going to be so hard to contain and just going to contaminate the whole place. Where you have a small craft room where, with a couple lights and, it's going to be, it's easier to contain and to treat those problems in a smaller environment. And, and so really, moving forward, it's going to be a really fine line, because, you got these commercial facilities, and they're into making money. That's really what the bottom line about those men. And most of those people aren't cannabis people. These are money people, and so they only know investment and returns. To me, cannabis is more of a market, kind of like fruits and vegetables. It's a commodity market where, today it might be worth, and supply and demand. Today it might be worth this much, and tomorrow it might be worth half that much. And so, a lot of that changes. I look at cannabis as a fruit or vegetable because it has a certain shelf life. When you pick it, there's a certain ripening to it. And, once you, have something sitting on a shelf for 6 months, by that time, it's pretty much dried out, and, the terps are gone, and it's going to taste like hay, and it's not going to be a good experience for the consumer.
Yeah, exactly that. And when that's not the focus, it's the mass. How much biomass times that by X equals to, and it's formulaic. They've not got the passion or the love for it. It's obviously recently it was MJ BizCon in Las Vegas, I think last week. I don't know what week this is going out within the past couple of weeks.
Right, yeah.
So I think that is quite described by a lot of the legacy as the mecca of let's call them the chads, which seems to be the colloquial term used to describe non-legacy kind of rich kids getting into cannabis for the financial return in the short term gains. And yeah, I think there seems to be this war for the soul of cannabis. And as you said before, I agree entirely. It should be regulated as a commodity, so allowed to fluctuate based on supply, demand, and further other socioeconomic factors, like many other things. Whereas the investors that have made their money from the first few states that went legal, the big boys, then seem to move into the next few states and rally and get people together to then put in place regulation and legislation that benefited their model, their bottom line, until these little fish became big fish from eating all the fish, until there's just a couple of giant fish left in this pond. And the little guy's obviously just trying to get around, but they're going to starve. There's not enough client base for them. People that become more experienced. So obviously every year there's more novice consumers for them to exploit through marketing gimmicks and sexualization of women and cartoon images and all the rest of it. But the people that understand will grow the longer they have a relationship with cannabis, once they've got an opportunity to grow it, to go on these forums, to look on social media, to connect with these online communities. I think we'll just continue to grow. And because we offer so much more in freedom and knowledge, and as you said, the desire, the want to share that knowledge with the next generation, not hoard it for our own potential financial future. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, there's nothing worse than, buying a bag of weed and then it doesn't work for you. It for me personally becomes quite frustrating. You can give me an ounce, you can give me a ton of the shit, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work for me. You can give me an 1/8 ounce of Chem Dog, and I'll be happier than a pig in shit. So I don't think that they really, recognize, the craft part of it, and kind of like what you said, and the thing is like the people that have the knowledge don't have the money, but the people that have the money don't have the knowledge.
Yeah.
And so, there's a big disconnect between that. It's really, with Verde, who I'm working with, they're on they're into craft. They are growing for rosin production. So, they have a whole nother mission, and, which is very hard to find on the commercial end, and I've talked to a lot of different people, and, you go and tour their facilities or whatever. And, and then you try to, visualize where you fit into the picture and all of that, because a lot of these people just want to rape you for your genetics. They want you to come in, they want you to bring in all of this stuff, and then, a year later down the road, see you later. And, and even with that, they could still have that and still not be able to reproduce what craft does. A lot of it has to do with, the way they run the environments, the rooms, and that's like another thing, just to build out certain facilities I go into, and it's just like, you just shake your head. And a lot of these guys are under the mindset they already have invested X amount of $1 million into their facility, but it's not right, and now they have to invest even more money to make it right. And now they're juggling money, and, it just becomes a really big shit show at the end, people not getting paid and so on and so forth. And so it's a jungle out there. Yeah. And I think it's just going to keep getting worse, in my opinion, too.
Left unfettered and unchecked under neoliberalistic capitalism, it will cannibalize itself. I think that is inevitable. We are seeing that since Reaganomics and Thatcherism in the sort of mid to late 80s. All industry is now devouring itself until there's a few giants left at the top. And I think the cannabis is unfortunately following the same. If we look at the first wave of major investors was pharmaceuticals, tobacco and alcohol, and moved in pretty quick and got pretty comfortable with the industry. And so this is what I was sort of alluding to before, with different states sort of coming on board. One thing I did want to ask you actually is quite interesting. In the midterm elections in the US recently, there was 5 US states were set to vote on the potential of legalizing adult use, but only 2 of them passed. I've obviously looked at them, and the others I think that didn't pass are more Republican. So in the UK, they're a bit more sort of conservative leaning. Right. But so what are your thoughts? Do you know of anything as to why some states went some ways? I saw also that the legislation was quite restrictive actually in the other 3. They didn't include expungement. Was that
Yeah, I mean, really in the U.S., there's really a real culture war going on where states in the South are more Republican and more conservative, as you say. A lot of them are very religious, and those people, they don't want anything to change. They just want everything to stay the same. And you talk Republican, in my mind, you're talking old money, generational, especially down south, where they've had plantations and just generational wealth through tobacco and different industries. And they just, it kind of just blows my mind because, when you go down there, it's just, some of the people are great. Don't get me wrong. There's some of us people that live down there, but they're in the minority, unfortunately. And, everything down there is, kind of run by the good old boys. And so, when they see, people like me that come up from north, my Yankee ass, they don't like people like us because we think outside the box. We will challenge your positions, and really a lot of it comes down to what's right and what's wrong. I mean? And it's like you can make the biggest smoke screen, and that's kind of been the legacy of cannabis to begin with. There's still certain stereotypes and auras that are put on cannabis, and those more conservative types kind of stick to those points, where in reality, when you see someone in a seizure and they take cannabis, they get some, those kids that are in and they get the shot in the mouth, the liquid, and then 10 seconds later they're like normal, So to me, the proof is in the pudding, and you can't deny certain things and facts. But those type of people, and I don't like to get political or anything like that, but a lot of the election deniers and people like that, that's what their mindset is. And I'm a person that goes on facts. If they showed the facts of what they were fighting for, then you have no other other way to agree with them. But the proof is in the pudding. If you can't put up, then you just shut up, because and that's what people do. They have the largest microphones and they just try to drown out everyone else. And it's kind of like the same thing that's going on with the marketing of cannabis today.
Yeah, it is those that profit from the ignorance of a certain population are intent and hell-bent on keeping them ignorant. Because it's interesting that if you then actually look at the foundations of the southern, what was back then the southern colonies of prior to the US, they were growing cannabis. It was under mandate from the British king at the time, I believe it will have been, in Jamestown. The cannabis had to be grown. It was an offense to not grow cannabis once you had a certain size colony, and a certain percentage of it had to be brought back in taxation. We often talk about like the Boston Tea Party and tea and other taxable goods, but cannabis has been written out of the history of the South, but it is equally as prominent and as connected to it, as you say, as tobacco, as slave trade, and as many other sort of mass industry, cotton, etc. So it is quite peculiar that they are sort of refusing to have that conversation. But I think what you say is true. Facts are facts, but we live in a world with manipulative algorithms, biased news sources, and people are people at the end of the day, and we can only take in so much information. And I don't necessarily blame them for their ignorance or their stance on this, but I do wish that more could be done. And I think more should be done by those commercial interests, as you were saying. But to go back to this whole thing of the craft versus commercial, the difference is the commercial industry are just trying to get the pinnacle of the highest THC number. Highest number, I win. They've just completely missed the point of this, that the best weed I've ever smoked is low teens. And the terps are 3-4%, and you are on your ass for about a day. It's the combination, the synergy, the entourage effect, as we're learning to describe, of all of the smaller amounted cannabinoids, the synergy of the terpenes, of flavonoids to a certain lesser extent. And they're not interested in the science of that for the consumer. They're all doing it in their laboratories, obviously, and wanting to use that information, sell it to the pharmaceutical companies. But it feels like they're just trying to dumb down the cannabis that we can have. So that obviously, those that know can grow it at home, but the commercially available, it's like McDonald's. It looks like food, tastes like food, but is it really food?
No, I agree. Most cannabis that I like probably test anywhere from 18 to 25%. And there's a lot to be said in the cannabinoids and the burning of cannabinoids in vegetative matter. There's certain things that once that's combusted that we don't even know about today. There's certain chemicals, makeups, and effects. We can, we've done some testing, before, pre-testing, but, the actual burning of the cannabis, in a vegetative matter, there's something about that, because when you smoke hash, I don't get the same euphoric feeling, any kind of concentrates or anything like that. And don't get me wrong, I like my hash and concentrates, but first and foremost, I'm a flower consumer, and for the reasons why I just explained it, I can't really pinpoint it myself, but there's something about when I just smoke, it just gives me like that warm, fuzzy blanket feeling, more euphoric. It's more body, where you smoking concentrates or hash, it's more head, and so, there's a lot more research, I believe, that has to be done, and on the research point, like, here in America, there hasn't really been any real, scientific medical research. I mean, it's starting to happen now, but, and I know the government has been doing it for quite a while. And, and most of the things that we've learned, we've had to learn on our own. And that's really the one thing about cannabis is, like, you really can't, if you're not involved in it and you're not actually doing it, then you really don't know anything about it. Like, you can be book smart and read all of the information that's out there on it, but when it really comes down to it, personal experience works best, and and that really brings you back to craft. You know what I mean? Where the craft people that have the experience and have the knowledge and have the passion, those are the ones that are really making it happen. And, and where the guys on the bigger end, they're just kind of sucking up all that gravy, because they can afford to do that.
Exactly that. They can run at a loss. And it's odd that, well, it's not. I suppose it's classism in a lot of ways. The people that have the kind of money that is necessary to acquire licenses and set up infrastructure within the legal states and places around the world, they are pals with the friends that then go, oh, well, I've got botanical degree, or I've read about cannabis, or I've heard, and we can go, and I've got this mate at the Home Office and we'll set up this thing. Versus if they just talk to the criminal class or the criminalized class, the clandestine growers that have grown during Prohibition, that have managed to pull down 10,000 plants in an abandoned church and no one ever noticed, and the product was brilliant. I want the person that has honed their skills on the climb of the hero's journey, that has really accrued their skill set, versus the guy that has been plumped into the perfect environment and read some books and managed to get it right. Like, that's not, it's not the same. It's not even, it's the rewarding of it as well. You want to reward the investment, the hard work of that clandestine grower over the college kid that's just saying, I can do this, I can do whatever. But
really, I think the whole system is kind of set up for corporate. They don't want craft. They don't want small mom and pop. I don't know what their fear is. I don't know if the fear is that we're going to be able to outperform them, or we're going to be backdooring stuff out the back door illegally. Or they're going to oversaturate the market. Like, I don't really see, because even someone like me, I can't get a license, because I can't afford it. I don't have millions of dollars to invest in that. I might have a small little nest egg to start a small mom and pop business, but even with that, you're still talking probably like $1 million, and and they won't even let us. They won't even let us get to that, to compete, and really one of the biggest disconnects here in the States is all right, New York is legal, all right, New York, legal weed, but all right, I want to get a license, all right, well, only X amount of cities or towns are going to allow it, all right, that's just taking an example, all right, you can pick any town, and what happens? So the state says, all right, it's up to the town if they want to opt in. The town opts in. All right, we're going to allow 4 facilities in our town. Now that gets kicked down. Now, how do you make application to that? What's the process of them awarding those applications? Is it on points? Is it on favoritism? Is it the mayor's brother's son? Like, how does that all kick down? You're only allowing, it's legal, but we're only allowing 4 facilities, and how are you supposed to compete to get into that. Now you got to go down and lobby the town council, the mayor. You got to make all kinds of contributions to the town, and the whole thing becomes a whole political mess. Instead of simply just allowing, the market to correct itself, let the floodgates open, and the people that make it, and the ones that don't. But the way that they have it is they have it set up so craft and small growers can't get in. That's how they're acing us out, is by regulations. And so, instead of, all right, we're going to make it legal, but it's not going to be easy for you to get a license. So, what I'm going to stay black market and undercut the legal market. And that's what they're setting themselves up to happen. Because legacy is not going to go away. People started legacy, black market, when they were getting jailed. And now, actually, you know what? If you come and if I have too many plants, what are you going to give me, a fine? Like, what are you going to do to me? You're not going to put me in jail. So I'll pay $1,000 or $5,000, whatever. It's just part of doing business in my eyes. It ain't going to stop me. I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, and then keep undercutting. You're not going to get your tax money. And so we'll see what happens. It's going to be a war, I think. Well, it is already.
Entirely that, because these corporations, once they conglomerate to a certain size, they'll do what capitalist corporations do. They'll find a way to produce tax havens to avoid paying tax, to make sure that there isn't any money going out. So for the minute, they're all happy to pay that to play, to establish themselves, and they're waiting to buy up all of the mom and pops who manage to scrape and save and get all that a full town together to open up a little, it's by us, for us. They're just trying to wait us out. Exactly that. They're trying to starve the legacy. But also what they're trying to do is they're trying to eliminate home grows. They lobby against home grows. So those people cannot produce their own medicine. So they got to go to their dispensary to buy their product that is probably way less than what the person that's, doing the home grow doing. Exactly that. When we look at FECO, full extract cannabis oil, the idea of people producing it at home for a variety of ailments and prophylactic use, that is just completely not accessible on the current system, really. And it's the New York situation is an interesting one, because I decided to look into this a bit more. I've been keeping an eye on it for a while, but obviously there's been an acceleration of news actually the past couple of days. So you're right. It's New York's kind of crap given the size of it. They're limiting it to 175 licenses. They've so far had 900 applications, which is still open to the end of the year. They've issued the first 36 on Monday, which will be, for continuity, folks, Monday. I just want to add in something real quick about the application. Just to let you know, 900 applications are all non-refundable. Of course they are. Of course, everything has to be a money-making exercise. Again, it's just, so as you said before, of lobbying, of even just the speculation to think about getting a license costs you money. Then the application process, and again, even funding, getting everything together, because the expectation is that you are supposed to be a fully fledged business person. You are supposed to have had all of the experience in a legal market, and somehow all of the experience you've had in an illegal market. Exactly. That's what I was just going to say. It's a catch-22. Yep. So it's interesting. So New York have obviously, I've really appreciated the language that was in New York's bill versus quite a lot of other legislation that's being proposed and passed in America as you guys call it, so-called recreational or adult use. But they really tried to lean heavy on this social equity. So they've said that they've planned to stick £200 million, what's your currency? Dollars, damn it. $200 million into a private fund to help social equity. They were saying can I just make a point on social equity? Please do. To qualify for social equity, you had to have been arrested for cannabis. And then you've had to have run a successful business for 2 years, employing 6 people. Now, how many people get out of jail and open a business and employ 6 people?
So like that social equity program is a bunch of bullshit.
Do you know what it is? It's genius. I am very fastidious about language, as many of my previous guests and anyone that reads any of my writings will tell you. But that's really fucking manipulative and smart of them, to be fair, because actually what they're doing is, creating social equity, a term we're using. So they're stealing, co-opting that term. If you look at now, these raids that are happening in Brooklyn and various regions of these big companies that have opened up as dispensaries, I guarantee you they'll have been operating, trying to get into that window of operation. So they'll have employed a certain amount and qualify under certain categories of that social equity. They just won't hit the 2-year mark, but I reckon that will then give them extra points when it comes to application of licensing. So I think actually, whereas then the guys that are opening like the food trucks or the bodegas that are then converting, and they're going to get destroyed because it's not where the system wants them. Do you know what I mean? It's not, It's not the legal, air quotes, legalization they want, which to me is very painful because legalization is corporate restriction. Whereas if we got true, like you guys are using the term deschedule in America to deschedule cannabis, and that's where I want to see it, in that no matter what we do with the plant, we're cool. As long as it isn't a weapon, you don't use it to commit a crime, then it's cool. And there's the corporate side of it. But until we're unshackled at the bottom, as you say, and allowed to just grow our own and perfect our own genetics, explore what is out there and develop and cultivate these relationships with cannabis, they're going to continue to build and get a power and influence. But as we say, each generation are just going to move more towards that legacy, and we'll just get stronger and stronger and stronger.
Yeah, I think in the New York case, though, like if you're operating an illegal dispensary, I think from what the city was saying that you were not going to be able to qualify for a license. So I don't know if that's true or not. I know they're going around threatening people. If you're operating, you're not going to get a license. I don't know if, I would have to assume that most of those people did make application. And the one thing about making an application, like you have to secure a location. So that means paying rent possibly for a year and just and waiting for your regulations to kick in, and then you can open up. So, the pre-cost, to secure a building. And if you're paying $5,000 a month or whatever it is, once you sign that lease, you're on the hook for that year. You're going to be paying $50,000-$60,000 for something that's closed. And so it really gets back to the big money issue where, you got to invest in a location, you got to make application, you got to, by the time it's all said and done, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars, and to get a chance to get I'm not going to gamble my life savings away to get a chance, so I mean, and a lot of people are in the same situation.
Yeah. It's interesting. So they're going to follow the Canadian sort of model of going, if you did what we're now going to legalize tomorrow or today, you're not going to be in business tomorrow. So obviously there was that whole period of time where the Toronto government was putting giant concrete blocks outside the front of shops and was doing everything it could to obstruct the sale of cannabis without arresting the people because it knew its courts wouldn't prosecute them. Ultimately, then the decision was made against Mark and Jody Emery and others to, ban them, despite the fact that it was their actions and their work that built that industry in many ways, along with obviously many others. So again, it's frustrating. It's that paradox of how can you develop experience in this industry if you don't have the experience in the industry until there's an industry, and then in order to participate in the industry, you need the experience. It's like we have this paradox in the UK of young people leaving school with their CV, and the joke is kind of the one you would at 18 to have 2 years experience, but also have a degree. And it's like, well, how could I have gone to higher education if I don't? Then how could I have done both? You know what I mean? It's these paradoxes that are set to handicap us, and I think exactly that when you look at it. But I imagine there'll be some of those big boys that will have done that. I mean, it actually makes Cookie's marketing strategy, I suppose, quite smart in opening souvenir shops and being able to reaccrue the expenditure that is spent, hoping that that will eventually become a dispensary under the regulated system. Again, it's giving an advantage to one group over another, and intrinsically that to me is against the nature of cannabis and the cannabis culture. We are everyone consumes weed. Anyone that's been part of the legacy community understands its diversity, and to now be handing it over to a small subset of a culture, and it's classist. It's, do you have money and pre-existing connections and influence and a network of politicians and investors and bankers and bureaucrats? No, then get the fuck out of our industry. That's how they're setting it. They're building something that isn't for us, but is built on our hard work, the foundations of the legacy industry.
No, you're totally right. I see it just going in two different directions. You still, you got you're going to have the commercial, the way that it's going, and then you're going to have you got the legacy. So you got yourself a big split going forward, and that gap is just going to continue to widen and widen as time goes by, and as we get shut out more and more at opportunities. Because, like I said, legacy isn't going anywhere. I can survive doing what I'm doing for the rest of my life, to be honest with you. I'm not, living a high lifestyle, but I'm doing good. I can't complain, but would I like to take it to the next level? Would I like to take it to, trying to commercialize and do craft together, it's, of course, I would like to try to do that, but if I don't get the chance to do it, I could just stay doing what I'm doing. I'll be fine. Exactly that.
I can't wait till this underground movement starts to, I don't know, whatever language we use, because we started obviously the movement to legalize cannabis based on our interpretation that legalization meant ending the war on cannabis users, that the plant was free and we were free to do what we want. And yet this is what they've given us, this bastardized version of liberty. They've shackled our feet but unshackled our hands and gone, you're free. And it's like, hold on, this isn't quite what we asked for. And I think it's going to take a couple of years, but I do look forward to the rallies and the marches and, hopefully the legacy of like the Boston Cannabis March and things like that, the global cannabis march that we do every May, that these then, instead of being as they are co-opted for these movements towards corporate legalization, they become more grassroots based for this emphasis that we want to be free to work with cannabis, not to buy it from idiots that currently criminalize us, but to liberate ourselves from their criminalization.
Yeah, well, the thing is, like, they stopped arresting us, but they won't give us an opportunity. And so, like, where's the middle ground on that? Like, all right, we're not getting arrested anymore. But what I see moving forward is a lot more corporate cannabis rallying against, home grows, and stuff like that, it's a big thing here in the States. And like for me personally, like I was saying before, I want home grows. I want more people to grow. That means more people are going to buy seeds from me. You know what I mean? And that's just not here in the States. That's all around the world now, with the internet, we're talking, and, I have people in Europe and Thailand and Australia. I mean, I've sent seeds all around the world. And so, I find that just, really, that's one of the most amazing things that I really find, and that we're able to connect on that level. But still we still all, have the same, I think, end goal or whatever, where, everyone wants to have an opportunity to do whatever they want to do. If you just want to have a home grow and make your own medicine, or, or if you want to have a small mom and pop shop, or if you want to do an edibles thing, there's so many opportunities for people to get into some type of, of the business, and it's a shame that, that they're just kind of strangleholding us, like you said, putting the shackles on us. and not letting us compete. That's all I want to do, is be able to compete.
Exactly that. I don't just want to be offered a bud tender job. I don't just want to be offered an assembly line minimum wage role.
In those jobs, let me tell you, they're like factory workers. When you work in those facilities, it's horrible. The only thing you're doing is, some people are just spraying pesticides all day. Some people are just watering all day. Some guys are just transplanting all day. It's like, when you're doing all that yourself, you're not doing it the same thing repetitiously day after day after day. One day you might be doing this. Next day you're doing that, whatever. So it breaks that monotony up. But when you're in that commercial facility and your main job is to go around and suit up and spray pesticides when the lights are off, I mean, that's just a fucking horrible job.
Yeah, man, exactly. And it's Henry Ford and others kind of figured this out with the creation and the perfection of the assembly line. It was a way of breaking unions. It was a way of breaking the accrued skill of the individual, that if you broke them into components, you can train them to be a cog, but that cog will never understand how to replicate the machine. And unless you get everybody to leave the factory and set up their own, they're not going to be able to compete. And it was a way to keep people, and don't want to use the Karl Marx term of proletariat, but the working class, the indentured, deliberate, impoverished class, stuck in these minimal roles where they will never accrue enough of a skill set to be able to use that facing forward to independently make money,
advance themselves. Yeah,
exactly. And I think that's what we're seeing with this. I mean, I've seen some, I'm a bit of a technology nerd at times as well with some of the stuff, but some of the things that I've seen approaching cannabis and is scary, like LiDAR technology and stuff that monitors plants. And I'm like, wait, so you are trying to make it so a human doesn't touch the plant. A plant goes in the seed and then is never, like, whoa. So many red flags going off in my head. It's like every morning I've got to say I love you to my girls. It's like, how are you doing, ladies? How are you feeling? And it's you build that relationship with them, as you said before, of craft of a small facility. You physically have eyes on that plant. And I don't care how good the cameras are with your 4K, whatever. It's not going to pick up. You're not going to be able to train the AIs to have the same intrinsic knowledge that growers do, that can just suddenly go, there's something wrong with that plant. I don't know yet. I can feel it. I'm just going to take her out, move her. And that is a skill that's, it's beyond cognitive intelligence. It's like horror intelligence. It's gut. It's your gut instinct. You can't program that into these machines. And that, it worries me that the human element is going to be removed from it, so that as generations die off, they go, well, why do I need to grow my cannabis when I can buy it from a shop? That even the art of growing cannabis becomes lost.
No, you're totally correct. And like what I like to say is, like, the plants talk to you. Like when you go into the room, and just like you said, you see one plant that's kind of, and you're like, there's something wrong with that plant, and so when they're happy, they're like, stretching for the lights, stretching for the sun. They look shiny, they look beautiful. And when they're kind of droopy and not looking right, and, you kind of know something's wrong. And, I feel the same way. There's a real connection between plants and humans, just being, it's kind of like, almost like a dog or an animal, a pet in a sense, and, when you take really good care of it, and it's going to perform to its maximum potential, and that's that's all you could really ask for is to try to be able to maximize the potential of the plant, and just knowing all these little nuances and tricks, and it all makes a difference in the end. I've heard people saying the same thing, where they got dripping meters in there, and they're and it's just like, when you take the human element out of it, I think you've lost something for sure. And it just makes it that much more on the commercial size where, and I guess it depends on how you look at it. Like I consider my plants almost like pets, whereas people that or trying to monetize the plant to its full monetary potential, just sees that as a money tree, just sees it as dollars, and it doesn't. It doesn't quite work like that, because you got to be able to love the plant to maximize the plant.
Exactly that. I mean, look at what happens in the legacy industry. One guy grows, a bulk buyer comes and buys, 5 guys buy, 5 from them then buy, and then you've ended up with 10, 15 dealers, 10, 15 people employed. You think all of the people that are coming and buying from them that are then providing liquidity to that microeconomy. And that is repeated en masse across the world. If you then suddenly create this corporate system, you're then denying thousands of jobs, because it's again like the security systems and everything else. A cannabis grower, if you then need security guards, okay, that should be a person. Someone should be making a wage from that. We're now just past 8 billion people globally. We have a lot of people that need, unfortunately, into this current system, and without showing too much of my politics, we need fiat currency. We need physical tender to be able to trade for the things that we need. Whereas what cannabis can do as a resource is it's an infinitely replaceable resource. One seed, one plant, clone, boom. When you look at it then in industrial applications, that's when it gets really scary. And I think that's where home grow is terrifying to them, is that then the conceptual idea, the way if I can just grow a couple of plants and I can get a drug from it, what if we then got together, we could then grow homes from it? We now know we can make batteries, floors, concrete. Do you know what I mean? There's a plethora of other byproducts of cannabis that we're discarding. I mean, the commercial cannabis industry in the US at the minute is terrifying when you look at its waste, because the biomass from flower producers, your license means you can't do anything with it. You have to destroy it. Whereas that could be building carbon negative homes. It could be making, cannabis graphene batteries, supercapacitor batteries that are more conductive than lithium. There are all of these other potential industries that should be there, but it's not. It's about how many plants can you get in that tiny space? What is the gram per watt? What is your X, Y? And it's not about the product or the excitement of the breeder that's in there going, oh my God, yeah, we've just got this new thing and we're playing it. They're so far and few between, because the guys that are in there now, they're basically in the office and their boss is pressuring them and going, we better make this pound per watt estimation or else it's your head. You know what I mean? And they're getting in cheaper and cheaper labor. I mean, I've just seen, was it Oklahoma? There's a story that's emerging, I think yesterday, of 5 Chinese nationals that were shot and killed at a farm, and one of the owners or proprietors has been arrested. So we obviously then you look at Oregon and the Southern Oregon, Northern California border. There's still issues going on in some of the towns there where the sheriffs are declaring states of like local emergency to get extra funds because they're being inundated with gangs that are growing now. There are these issues where the same rogue elements that preyed on and operated in the legacy industry that weren't us, that came to, buy our product en masse, that would then grow cannabis cultivars, knowing that they were putting PGRs, they were putting potentially harmful and deadly chemicals within it, just to use it as a cash crop. They're popping back into this gray area. And it's frustrating that, again, there are these elements. There's going to be that war, as you sort of described it, of the corporate cannabis against, they're going to use these rogue criminal elements and say that it's our fault. And we're still here going, well, we never got to go off the start line. You never opened our gate. You opened the gate for you lot and for the international cartels that could come in and profit from your ignorance and your shortfall from the fact that you can't provide a quality product.
Yeah, no, in anything like that, you're just going to get, you're going to get elements like that. The one thing I can say, even though it's still going on, it's becoming lesser and lesser, those type of incidents, because just of the legality of everything. When things were illegal, it was kind of like the Wild West, and, people fought for control of certain markets and so on and so forth. And all that is kind of lessening, even though it's still going on. Because the stuff that those guys are going to be producing are going to be probably just as good as a commercial, whatever they're producing. Because most of those Chinese gangs and they're just just more on the commercial mindset than your regular small craft grower. So. There's going to, even when you break down craft now, you got your real true craft people that, just doing home grows. But then on the other side of that, you're going to have more sophisticated gang type of elements, organized crime. You got Mexican cartels, you got the Chinese, the Vietnamese, all of them are involved in cannabis, growing cannabis. There's a few other groups as well. And the only thing they really do is kind of flood the market with commercial weed. And, like right now, there's just oversaturation. You go into New York City and it's just like there's a dispensary or a truck or someone with a small stand on like every corner, and it's like, me just out of curiosity, I go and look to see what these guys are selling and, is there anything good? And the majority of it is just all commercial booth, and so really, trying to, if you're able to establish yourself and, really, as a craft guy, you only want a small little piece, there's a little piece of the market, because, most of the market isn't connoisseur, most of it's commercialized. So, you just want to be able to concentrate and you got to know who your customers are. You got to know what is your brand. Like for me, I could say most of my customers are more educated, older type of people. You're going to get some younger kids there that fall into that category, but the majority of those younger kids are going to be, they're going to be influenced by marketing and stuff like that, so they don't really have the knowledge. And when someone like that comes up to my booth and they start asking me all kinds of questions, I usually tell them, you know what, you're probably better off not buying my seeds because my seeds are too expensive. I was like, you're better off maybe, going, learning a little bit more and then come back and check me out in a couple of years, you know what I mean? Because, the last thing I want is someone, buying a 150 or 200 pack of seeds and they go and fuck them up and then they try to blame me for it. And so, I try to, try to focus on, the people, when they come up to my booth, they're like, give me a pack of this, a pack of that, and a pack of that. They already did their research. They already know who I am. They already know what they want. That's my kind of customer. When a customer comes up to my booth and I got to try to sell them, that's not my customer. I'm not a salesman, really. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a bullshitter. Like, I like to say that my work speaks for itself. And if you don't know about my work, then you should go and research it. And you should research anyone that you're going to be buying seeds from. And so, a lot of it really just falls back to the knowledge of the consumer.
Mm. Yeah, exactly that. You raise an interesting point, and I suppose for my UK audience, I just kind of wanted your opinion on it, really, because Stardog's ubiquity, it's basically interchangeable with sort of Albanian grown cannabis here in the UK. So obviously Europe in general, for all Albania, I think is population less than 3 million people. There are criminal organizations of Albanian nationals that are operating in most of northern and southern Europe, or just Europe in general, toward the sort of western end, running cocaine as well as cannabis. And here in the UK, the price of Stardog. So they grow Stardog and Amnesia Haze as two basically bulks. They've moved into sort of wedding cake and a few of the newer genetics that are out there that are sort of quite popular, or were quite popular when they moved into them. But they're able to drop boxes in regions, kilos in regions that are hundreds of pounds, thousands of pounds, sometimes cheaper than any hobbyist, than any craft producer can grow. And it's having this sort of effect where, as I sort of said before, to the cannabis buyer, the people who just go to their dealer and goes, I want weed. They don't care about strains. They don't want to learn anything about any of that. They just want to get high. They want to go buy their weed. When they're continually being faced with sort of Stardog, it's harming the reputation of it, in the same way you were saying before, of like a poor grower then grows some genetics and kills the plant, or, creates nutrient lockouts, deficiencies, has issues with soil pH or whatever. Then it ends up harming sort of that reputation. So I was just wondering on your thoughts, as obviously the ubiquity of Stardog then now getting that kind of tainted reputation. I just wondered how it made you feel. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I get exactly what you're saying. And I guess that can happen with the commercialization of anything popular. Because things get renamed, things are called Stardog, they're not even Stardog, So when it's kind of like when you call something the Crippy or the Piff, or like it just it's kind of a it seems like it almost becomes almost kind of a catch name of quality, to begin with, but then it gets commercialized so much on the other side that kind of gets lost in the translation of the weed itself. And this is what I would tell people. If you think Stardog sucks, buy a pack and grow it out yourself and then talk to me. That's what I like to tell people, because just because someone slapped the name Stardog on the bag, maybe it is Stardog. Maybe it was shittily grown, and maybe it's not even Stardog, and they're just using the name, to try to sell the weed. So, I don't take too much offense to that, because I just know that the commercialization of anything popular, and it's the same thing kind of like here with cookies. Like, cookies is kind of, more or less kind of like a commercialized, blandish, that's how people, how some people look at it. That's how I look at it. And that was from experience. I'm not just saying that because I'm a hater. If it was that good, I would be like, it is really that good. You know what I mean? Like, I can appreciate that. But when they try to put something that's mid-grade or blandish, and they try to put it up on this pedestal of something of greatness, and then you finally have the experience and you're like, what the fuck, man? Like, and so I kind of see the same thing with Stardog, where people have an anticipation, they've heard about it, and then they experience it and they're disappointed.
Yeah, and I think actually then it's a backhanded compliment, really, then, isn't it? If people are then saying it's crap because others are
right
saying that, ours is crap, we're going to call it the good thing. It's a good backhanded kind of compliment. It's interesting. We had the same sort of position with cheese for many years here in the UK, and it was again just the ubiquity of it. It was because of the mass availability of it that it was so highly sought after. That it was so highly sought after that once people realized that, okay, we can produce this, and produced it en masse, and again, just oversaturated the market. And then through various raids and through syndicates kind of breaking down, we kind of lost the genetics. And as soon as it was out of people's consciousness, there's that nostalgia effect kind of came in, and people were like, oh, I really miss cheese. But
what happened is where they went from cheese to Stardog, and now they'll go from Stardog to whatever the next one is, So it's, it's going to be an ongoing evolutionary thing, I think.
Yeah, I think Skittles is probably another one that's quite likely to replace that. that it's being crossed with everything and it's sold on its own sort of marketing. But yeah, it's interesting how like just a cultivar name becomes a colloquial term or an accepted term for good cannabis. I mean, we had that with skunk in the UK for many, many years, to our detriment, because then the papers picked up on it and went, well, this skunk weed is dangerous, this skunk weed. And it was just like, and they were saying it as if it was different. They understood it was different to other weed, but they didn't really describe it or really give anything about it.
Well, they started they tried to start public hysteria over it. Like people were overdosing on it and doing all kinds of weird things. And I forget what I was reading all kinds of crazy stuff.
Yeah, but they call it skunk psychosis is still a term we see. And it's interesting. I'll put a big allegedly here. For if this ends up in court at any point, the big allegedly allegations made by some quarters of the UK scene that GW Pharmaceuticals, now owned by Jazz Pharmaceuticals out in Ireland, paid journalists to perpetuate this in right-wing newspapers. Again, I'm not going to name the papers, even if I do put an allegedly there, because they've got many, many, many lawyers, and I'm just a small little stoner. But yeah, it's interesting how those historic mechanisms, now that we're moving into these legal markets around the world, it's interesting to watch the war of these various companies. You can almost see the interests of the CEOs playing out in the debates of, countries like Luxembourg and Switzerland and Germany and others. They're not doing it all of a sudden because they were like, oh, well, we were so bad to our 85 million, or however many million Germans there are in the world. I'm not even going to guess at what the German population is. Erase that. That didn't happen. Whatever the German population is. So I don't think it's about liberalization. I think it's these commercial interests landing in Europe that are now forcing the hand of certain politicians, going, this is a vote winner. You can say you're going to legalize cannabis, but they won't ever get to grow it. They won't ever get to do anything with it. Don't worry. They'll think they will, but the rest of us will get to do what we want. And so I think that's what we're seeing sort of as a consequence of American commercialization through legalization, is so much power and influence that it's leaking out into the rest of the world. And it's odd. No,
you're 100% right, because really America is the one that set the standard for illegal cannabis. They went around the world making cannabis illegal in legal countries, and now, 50 years later or whatever, now America's leading the world in legal cannabis. And, so now, you got other countries, like you said, that just follow our lead more or less. And, they can kind of be like, well, if America's doing it, then we can do it. And, if they realize the monetary and tax benefits from all of that, and, the jobs it creates. And I mean, when you really dive into it and see and look at the beneficial effects that it can bring, look at Thailand now. It's becoming a mecca there, from what I hear. And
as soon as they announced Thailand, I immediately began sort of celebrating it as an opportunity for a population-driven revolution rather than a corporate down enslavement.
And that's how they're rolling it out for the people. They're letting the people get involved. You're not going to tell some guy, that he can't apply for a license while someone else over there is doing it. Over there, they have open markets. It isn't like they only confine alcohol licenses to a certain number. They let the whole thing wide open and let the market, correct itself. And that's the way it should be in any open market.
Well, that's what these neoliberals preach is free market economics, which is supply and demand, yet they are restricting demand and basically gaslighting us, saying there isn't the supply. And it's like, well, wait, what? The other way around. They're gaslighting us, saying that there isn't this demand while controlling supply, when actually the more cannabis that there is, all it means is that cannabis as a commodity gets cheaper, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because then crap weed will then be cheap for the people that want their commercial and don't know any better, and craft will retain its value in the same as it does with alcohol. You can go and buy Budweiser, but the microbrewery economy is massive, and people will pay 3 times, 4 times as much for something that they know, that they enjoy, that they really appreciate. For all it is, still a smaller market. Most people don't want to be Steve Jobs. They don't want to be Mark Zuckerberg. Yet it feels like a lot of, I keep using the derogatory term Chad, but these Chads in the industry, these new money kids that are coming in, they want to be the Budweiser of cannabis, the Starbucks of cannabis, without realizing the culture doesn't want a Starbucks of cannabis. It doesn't want. Do you know what I mean?
No, I think people want is more small, regionalized, suppliers. They want someone in their hometown or someone they might know, or, someone that does craft. And, and you bring up a good point. And whereas, you're going to have, a lot of the smaller, cheaper, commercialized customers, and then you're going to have the more higher end micro type of customers. And so really, what does that tell you? That tells you there's room for everyone. There's room for a micro guy, there's room for a commercial guy. There's always going to be more of a younger commercial crowd in my eyes, because they just don't have the experience. And with that, a lot of them don't even know what illegal cannabis is. Whereas most of us older people have gone through that. I don't think there's going to be a lot more older people smoking cannabis just because it's legal now. They made that decision years ago, and I'm sure they had some type of experience with it. Whereas now, these younger kids just come up, and it's just like drinking some beer or alcohol when you're 21. Whereas there was more of a, more. It was what. Back then, it was, when it was illegal, it was just, some people just didn't want to touch it just because of that.
Yeah, so by its nature, then exactly, it normalizes it, so that once you become of age, it's a rite of passage. So I think, as we kind of alluded to before, though, there's almost a mathematic formula that could be sort of deduced from this, that as they get older and have more experience, they would then naturally start to, if this system continues, it creates this natural divergence where the older the person gets, the further away from the commercial element they are likely to become. Because if they get, that's not true. That would be true if they have the experience of the other, of the illicit market, of the grey market, of the legacy industry. So this is, I guess, what they're banking on. Their business model is based on that eventually the people who know the legacy industry know what good weed, I say good weed as if I'm not saying all commercial is bad and all legacy is good, but in a general sense, the quality I've found in the illicit market over legal markets where I've traveled is far better and continues to be better, hence the reason those markets proliferate. But if they can somehow keep that away, and those people that produce that just die off, just generationally, it becomes less of a thing to do. Again, it takes us back to that point of I worry that the people who want and deserve, as we all do, an opportunity to cultivate a relationship with cannabis in the same way you can have houseplants or you can get a pet, or as you said before, it belongs to the people ultimately. And I think that any movement that isn't based on the people being liberated to do what they want with it first is exploitation. It's profiteering from continuing prohibition, not ending it.
No, I agree.
There's a couple of points on here that I wanted to ask you as well, like I sort of mentioned in the intro there. I don't know if this is a point of controversy or contention with yourself, but I did want to ask if you could maybe tell us sort of the story of New York City Diesel and the original New York City Diesel, and sort of why they're sort of considered separate.
Like I had mentioned earlier, the Chem 91 was referred to as the original diesel, the New York City Diesel, And so I guess it was sometime in the early 2000s, I guess Soma had from the story that I remember, he acquired some bag seed. I think someone had given him. Someone was in New York City and had bought a bag of diesel, and he found some seeds in it, and he grew them out and bred with them and created the New York City diesel, the Soma New York City diesel with it. And at the time, us in New York were kind of offended because we're like, how does some guy in Amsterdam get off by saying, he has diesel from New York City? And, and when I did finally get to experience some of the Soma diesel, it was nothing like what we had in New York at the time. Most of the stuff that was going around at that time was a sour diesel. So I assume that that's the bag seed that he got. Like I said, the 91 was nicknamed that, but was not really marketed under that diesel name. So it was kind of a side name for it. And I think Soma kind of picked up on that and try to monetize, the whole thing to his benefit without really the true representation of what it was, And so, everyone took a little bit of offense to that. It wasn't, nothing personal. But then, as I started breeding and getting more successful and started moving a little bit more forward, it was like, fuck him. I'm making the original New York City diesel, and I'm just going to put the O in front of it, just like they did in Amsterdam with all of the stuff, all the knockoff. The way I looked at it is he knocked us off and then I knocked him off, so that's where the original comes from, because, people, and that was really a similar tactic in Amsterdam where someone would have something like the haze. Everyone called it the haze. Well, I have the original haze, the real haze, so a lot of it is just kind of like marketing stuff. And, so that's really where that kind of stems from.
Yeah, see, it's interesting because from a lot of the breeders that I speak to, again, you're not creating something that is an end product. It is by its nature an evolving line of lineage of its genetics, and most people just want to be not even like honored in it, but to have their genetic referenced. If you then going to mention its parents and its lineage, give it the correct names, because in doing that, you honor the breeder. You don't need to say this by this guy. The people that know. And in the future, people will be able to then back and go, actually, and document who's done what. It doesn't need the same accreditation as it is today in the kind of co-branding, but it is just that basic kind of, I suppose, respect in saying that this is this. You're not trying in any which way, either by intention or accidentally, to mislead anyone,
Yeah, and that's kind of how I always try to market my strains. I always tried to make it some type of connection to the parents, and then sometimes you get the total direct opposite, whereas the dirty taxi, as per se, there's no real linkage to the parents other than maybe the dirty factor, the name game is kind of funny sometimes. I always try to keep it relative to the source. This way, just like you explained, you got some type of reference or whatever. And, even if you're using, someone else's genetics or whatever, it isn't like you're copying it. You're just trying to, make a different version of it using different stuff or advancing the genetics in some type of way.
Mm. Yeah, exactly that. And I think as long as there's sort of that open and honest kind of conversation there through, the branding and whatever else, then yeah, I think we're all quite happy for that to continue.
Yeah, and just another point on that, I've always tried to, I've never really tried to hide any of the breedings or whatever. To me, like, someone that wants, say chem dog, and they can't get the real chem dog clone or whatever, then they want to, they're going to want to buy a pack of seeds that's going to be closest to that, and so that's kind of how I've tried, and tried to be transparent, be open about my breedings, being like, yeah, I am going to cost the 91 into whatever. And, this way you kind of build an anticipation, a kind of a little bit of a hype. And in this way, your customers will be like, oh, well, I want to get that 91 or whatever, and just trying to keep that openness, the transparency of what you're doing. And I think people, they appreciate that and they want to see that. And the internet is another tool of being able to do that.
Yeah, for sure, man, for sure. I think we've covered quite a lot of the questions I've got on here. I suppose actually I introduced you as being Jersey born, but obviously since 2015, I think it says in my notes, I can't tell from my own scribble there, you've been living in Colorado. Can you sort of tell us about that?
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, I was, I had started growing in the late 90s, and around 2012, I was up at my upstate grow house, and the septic tank had blocked up and was unusable, and I wasn't able to shower that weekend, and I had been cutting, I had been harvesting. And I had been driving home. I was driving down in Jersey. I was I'd been driving for a couple hours, and I mean, not maliciously speeding, but just kind of not paying attention. I started going down a hill, and, I hit like 82 miles an hour. The speed limit was 75, and then it went up, and then it went up, and there was a cop on top, the shooting radar right down to the bottom of the hill. So he got me right away. He pulled me over right away. He smelled weed, yanked me out of the car. I mean, I might have had a couple grams on me, but unfortunately, I had like an empty fertilizer bottle in my back trunk, which was, not very sloppily of me. Usually, I don't conduct myself about that. The conversation then led into growing weed, and if I had a house up in New York, if I owned property, blah blah blah. And I kind of knew where this was going to be going. The electric was in my name. Everything was in my name. So really, the New Jersey State Police would just had to contact the New York State Police. They could have ran my name. They would have saw that my name would have popped up on a utility bill, which was kind of high. It would have probably prompted them to come out to do a walk around, an investigation. And so when that happened, I was just like, that's it. I pulled the plug. I closed the house down. I had to stop growing for a couple years. I had to go through the whole legal procedures. I got a DWI. They just wound up really fucking me at the end. So once I finished up all the legal stuff, I was just like, I'm out of here, because at the time I knew the potential that my company had. And the last thing I wanted to do was get caught up or go to jail in the legal system, have my hands tied, not being able to grow, have to deal with probation, people coming over your house, the whole 9 yards. So I just pulled the plug and then decided, that I was going to move to a more friendlier state where I was going to be able to, continue my work. So I came out to the Cannabis Cup in 2015. Well, I had been coming out here for, a number of years, but I came out here. A friend of mine from Michigan had just was in the process of moving out to Colorado. So he was like, hey, come out and hang out with me for a couple of weeks and see if you could find something. So in May, I came out for a couple of weeks. I started putting feelers out, for if anyone knew a cannabis-friendly landlord. And luckily, a friend of mine was using a guy, and he had an extra house. And so I was able to, restart up and, get things going again, and then just slowly work myself back into the mix of things. I wound up, after the year was successful, I was able to save a bunch of money, and I had some money. So then I bought a house up in the mountains, came out here, I went up there, and then, my wife and family was still in New Jersey. We wound up putting the house up for sale, and then moving out here full time, pretty much. And it was really to escape the law enforcement and getting caught up. My main thing was you get caught up in these probation things. They got you piss testing. They got you jumping through hoops. They're showing up at your house randomly and all that. I can't. I had gone through that numerous times previously, and I just wasn't going to do it again. I was just at the end of my wits, and I was just like, "That's it. I'm moving." And really, it really opened up an opportunity for me to really get exposed to the commercial end of it more, where I had no experience whatsoever in any of these commercial facilities or whatever. I was able to hook up with Be Good. I ran their grow for like a year and a half. In the end, things didn't work out. We split, as friends. And then I, got, a year went by, and then Chuck Lemon, my friend, he's part of the Verde group, and, he got a conversation started down there. I met Julian, the guy that does he does all the extracts. He does the rosin production and stuff. So he was more interested in finding hash producing strains. So, their main thing is, is rosin, is hash. So they, is trying to find the stuff that's going to give them the best product. So, I gave them a list of seeds. We wound up doing a big pheno hunt. They bought, like 200 seeds of one strain we've hunted in a couple of instances and stuff. And so just being able to get exposed to that kind of as broad and, everything for myself and my, and to see actually what is the other side, like the commercial side. And, like I said, I ran a spot myself for a year and a half, and it's not a lot of fun. At the end, I had lost my passion. I knew it was time to hang it up. I was miserable. I didn't want to go to work every day. Just the testing procedures. There were multiple reasons why it didn't work out. And that's just the way that it was. It was kind of a learning curve for me, but I think in the end, I made the right decision on moving out here. I would love to get back into New York or New Jersey at some point, but I need to go back to something. I need to have an opportunity, a license, some type of, because like I said, I could just stay doing what I'm doing here and I'll be fine. But, I would definitely want to try to take the next step in the legal market and at least try to be able to compete, because I think I have a brand that can be just as big as cookies, and built on substance and not, some kind of advertisements and yeah. So
yeah, and you should be offered that opportunity. This is sort of, as we've alluded to throughout this podcast, it is frustrating that that's not what legalization means. But it should mean that fair opportunity. You are in the land of the American dream. You're all supposed to have the same opportunity to be able to make it. Yet the legislation around cannabis obviously is different by different states. I mean, now what is it? Over 50% of the population have got access to adult use in some way because of the way the populations are situated in various states. Yeah, those people are not given the opportunity to participate truly in the market. They may be able to, as we say, get an entry-level job, but it's not the same as getting into any other industry. There isn't going to be the same ascension through the ranks because of the specification and the breaking down of the roles, so that people are never really learning how to grow one plant, how to really understand it, to observe it, to spend enough time to build experience with it. And I think it's very sad.
Yeah, well, like here in Colorado, and a lot of it's market based. You really got to know your market. I came from a very high end market. New York, New Jersey. People have a lot. They make a lot of money. They have a lot of expendable income. People want the best of the best, and they're willing to pay for it. I'm sure LA, Miami, New York, you're going to get them. You're going to get those type of high end markets that will people with money will pay. Where here in Colorado, in Denver, the mark, there's not as many people. People aren't making as much money. So. So you got to really know the market you're getting into. And like here in Colorado, they were the first state to really go rec. So they really went overboard on a lot of the regulations, because they knew that like everyone that had the microscope on them, everyone was watching what Colorado was doing. Oh, they're going to fuck it up. You know what I mean? And that's the one thing that they went over regulated everything because they didn't want to get that, stereotype pinned on them, and then once California opened up and, it's kind of loosened up a little bit, but like to get into the market here, I mean, to buy in, you're going to need millions of dollars, and then you're buying into a market that's shit. A lot of these people I see, they invest $10 million, $20 million in a facility. And it's like, I'm thinking like, how the hell are you ever going to get your money back? Like, how long is it going to take you to get your money back if you get your money back? Because the thing about the cannabis is like, as is expanding across the states, the only thing that really made it worth anything was the fact that it was illegal. And so now when you're seeing it open it up more and it's getting more oversaturated now that you're seeing that, the prices are just kind of like just bottoming out, where it might have been, where it's not even feasible to do a profitable business, because if you got to pay your rent, you got to pay to keep the lights on, you got to pay your employees, you got to pay for supplies. You need all of that to keep your business open. And so like, and if you can't keep up with any of that stuff, and that's even before you even, not even saying how much money or profit you're going to make at the end, and so like, what I found out is like you work harder and you make less money, in legal weed. And that's just the fact. And I think it, as it opens up more, it's just going to be becoming more and more like that. Unless you can establish yourself as a, find that niche in the market that, that you're going to be able to make money. And, here in Colorado, you got to be involved in flower. You got to be involved in edibles. You got to be involved in concentrates. You got to be involved in anything that makes money across the board. And if you put all of those together, you might make a little bit of money if you're lucky, Yeah, I mean, it's just, it's just getting worse and worse. And like you were saying, these corporations and big money, they can just sit on a market for X amount of years and just write that money off and just force everyone else out of business. bottom out the market and then mark up the market once you have no more competitors.
Yeah, that's exactly what I fear is happening. And actually, is a good segue on to sort of my next point. I fear the same individuals, the same. I often sort of have a Freudian slip and call them vulture capitalists rather than venture capitalists. But the same people who have sort of bastardized cannabis legalization are now moving into psychedelic reform. So obviously your current resident state, Colorado, in the midterms in November passed Prop 122, decriminalizing natural psychedelics. I obviously see the Grateful Dead banner behind you there. So I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on sort of this new wave of psychedelic sort of revolution, mainly being, I suppose, corporate. It feels corporate led to us in Europe, but in America, obviously, these are population driven. It's a citizens' initiative. So I just wanted to get sort of your opinion on it and what you know about it.
No, you're right about that. It's really, population driven. I think it's been proven that, microdosing mushrooms and psychedelics has a big effect on PTSD patients and, people that have suffered trauma. And I think it's definitely going to be a small niche market. It's going to be really small, I think, because people aren't going to be using psychedelics at the same rate that they use cannabis. Mm-hmm. I could speak for myself. I only use psychedelics maybe a few times a year. If I'm going to a show or a special event or something like that. But there are people that need that medicine on a daily basis. And I think it's just opening the door for more research, to try to help these people. I don't know if the profit margins are going to be there like cannabis as per se. If you look at kind of like Amsterdam, where they, had a similar thing with mushrooms and chocolates and stuff like that. I think you'd have to be more in a tourist type of environment. If you're just talking about regular usage, like I said before, I think regular usage is probably more geared towards medicine and helping people on that level.
Mm. Yeah, well, I think I agree. I think you're right there. So the market will, by its nature, sort of be smaller, but maybe more profitable per product, if that sort of makes sense, because there isn't really going to be the same established market for it. So it isn't about competing for the cheapest price, as it were. It's interesting that it was natural psychedelics was sort of the terming of it. So it included DMT, mescaline, but I don't believe mescaline derived from peyote. And I think that was done for some grounds of it being protected under tribal grounds. Because when I was in Colorado, I drove through the northwest through a place called Mesa. Met with an activist and a farmer up there, and she was growing peyote cactuses in the front box on her property, and I was just like, what the fuck? And she's like, because she's tribal from one of the regional tribes, and it was the houses on tribal lands, and was explaining. I was like, wow, that's amazing. But it's interesting that the language in this includes expungement for previous convictions for people caught or convicted in trafficking, possessing, etc., any of these substances. Home production is technically allowed in this, so self-sufficiency for people who want to cultivate their own mushrooms. The gift economy loophole that was in Colorado from 2012 till the first sort of dispensaries opened up in 2014 will also be there. So theoretically, we could end up with sort of a farmer's market of these sort of compounds. And treatment centers is another one that's interesting in there that, as you say, its effects on PTSD, on trauma, on addiction. We notice the cessation of addictive tendencies when people take psilocybin-containing mushrooms. There are people who will have a DMT or ayahuasca experience and come back and say they're irreparably different. They are no longer traumatized by something that has plagued them for 30, 40 years. And I think that this is powerful in the hands of people with passion and with care. There is obviously a great culture of people that are trained trip sitters that have taken, their skill set. There's a great culture in America and in California that grew out of the movement when psychedelics were first criminalized, and they kept doing the underground therapies and doing the research and the work. And it is on the backs of those sort of great people that we kind of know what we're doing. I guess what my fear is, because what we're seeing, I'll explain it over here in the UK. So there is investigations being done on DMT for alcoholism, LSD for alcoholism, mushrooms for depression and anxiety, and various other iterations of the compounds and illness. But we've already seen in the UK, two places, I think Bristol and London, you can get ketamine infusions at £6,000 a pop. So it's this, I fear that, again, it's this classist kind of restricting that the people who need this most, the people who are traumatized by their socioeconomic position, they can't afford to feed themselves. They work to death doing 80 hours a week and don't have enough to cover rent. Their kids are starving. Their bills are overpaid. These are the people that need access to these kind of things to help them deal with the day-to-day reality, but they're going to be priced out of the market for the official therapies. And obviously Colorado, less than, not Colorado, but kind of the rest of the world, obviously Oregon as well, maybe, and there's a few of the different regions in the states that are looking at this. But the rest of the world, if you utilize these compounds yourself, without a doctor, without permission, you're a criminal.
Yeah, and I guess you can kind of compare it to medical cannabis in a way, where, the medical programs were set up for people that were sick, that had cancers and, real serious, life-threatening ailments. And, it's one thing to, make money off a recreational market, but in my eyes, it's a totally different when you're making money off and exploiting sick people that need medicine to live. Mm-hmm. And so I think there's going to have to be some type of line or program that was similar to cannabis, where they have a medical program where the prices are cheaper, you need to qualify for, and that kind of stuff. Because if you're going to just exploit, create a market to exploit people, I just don't think that that's right.
Yeah, I agree. And like I said, that is my fear, that America is kind of based on the principle of fuck Europe. Ultimately, if you look at its foundation and its history, it is, I say that as in America, both North, South, and the South America, just the Americas in general, are now in a stance of they're built on the colonial history of Europeans. And so there is this intrinsic idea of freedom and of liberty in some form or some way. Obviously, people will argue in the comments, I'm sure, below about that statement. What I mean by that is this, that the individual freedom is prefaced, is still important. Whereas then when these kind of evolutions of things within, like the creation of a cannabis drug industry, the creation of a psychedelic drug industry are coming to Europe, it's not about the individual's liberty or freedom. It's about, can we make that money from them? Can we keep them controlled enough that our systems continue? Whereas I think that enough of these population and citizen-led initiatives in regions in America can kind of destabilize and underpin the ills of capitalism that kind of rule the world, the excess of neoliberalism, to allow people to have more rational conversations, to see the world in a more refined way. Do you know what I mean? To actually perceive it rather than just being so traumatized by it that their lens that they see peer through from their little spaceship is so warped.
Yeah, well, the way I look at it is, if you look, indigenous Indians, a lot of that, mushrooms, cannabis, all these things are naturally grown. They're not manipulated, they're not processed. These are natural growing medicines And that could be said all around the world. There's all types of plants that become medicines, and of course, there's different effects, that come in with different medicines. And, I think that everyone has been more focused on the effects, and as in getting you high, than the actual medical benefits that are on the other side of the coin that haven't been explored or even researched medically yet. And, it's people that have taken it into their own hands, and have found that these plants work for whatever ailments that they have. And so you can't really argue with someone that is taking medicine that makes them better, even though it's illegal.
Exactly that. And this is the argument that's kind of going on, I suppose, in the academic world of whether all drug use is in some way medicinal. Because the argument made by prohibitionists is these drugs are harmful, are always addictive, always deadly, and always dangerous. Yet when we, sorry about that, when we look at the World Health Organization's published statistics on this, it's around about, if you take an average across the board, 25% is generous. About 25% of people that take any substance have a potential to develop a problematic dependency with that substance. That means that 75%, the vast majority of people, don't have problematic interactions with these substances. That means that if it's not a negative experience, it's either a neutral experience or it's positive. And that's exactly where we're missing what we're missing from the conversation, is that for decades we've been talking about the dangers and the harms of these things while minimizing and ignoring the potential benefits of it. And now it seems that they're focusing on capitalizing and commercializing the benefits of them without, again, understanding the cultural reasons. As you described before, your own personal psychedelic use. It's at special occasions during the year, it's at events or shows. That's the cultural use of these things. The benefits that I have had while taking MDMA from then talking to strangers at festivals and at music gigs around the country, I feel is far more invaluable than that which I would have got from a psychiatric setting in a hygienic, homogenized environment that I am frankly traumatized by because of my experience of being demonized and vilified as a drug user inside of that healthcare system. Whereas then my self-guided use, through reading and exploring the work of many great men before me, men and women before me that have written on this subject, and then just going out and learning about it, that has to exist in tandem with this, that there will be people that will seek that clinical environment and don't want to risk sitting at home one night and, eating 5 grams in darkness, as Terence used to say. But I think that there has to be that spectrum, as we described, of corporate and craft with cannabis. So this is why I'm really excited by what Colorado are doing there, in that it looks like they're creating the space for it. And I hope that with Oregon being the first state to go first to decriminalize a small personal possession of all drugs, which included natural psychedelics, that Colorado won't then go as heavy-handed on regulation as it did with cannabis, as you mentioned before.
Yeah, well, to me, they always say, cannabis is a stepping stone for harder drugs, leads you into heroin or whatever. But if you really, in an addiction, is a personal thing. You got to be able to control yourself and know your limits. But if you really want to start, from look at caffeine. Look at tobacco, look at alcohol. If you want to start talking about, stepping stones of addiction, there you go. You can just start off with those three right off the bat: coffee, cigarettes, and liquor. They are legal. I'm pretty sure that the detriment, the bad side of things have been documented. Alcohol kills, I don't know, millions of people, and then you go to cannabis, and it's like, well, how many people have died from cannabis? Now, I'm sure there's been a lot of people have done some stupid shit and got ran over by a car, or, while they were high, or did something stupid. But I'm talking about the actual ingestion of cannabis. I can't think of anyone that I have ever heard of that OD'd from cannabis. Mm-hmm. They like to, use cannabis. It leads you to harder drugs, this and that. But, I think that all starts way before that. You're drinking coffee, you're smoking cigarettes and drinking alcohol. I mean, if you don't get addicted from that, cigarettes is one of the worst, probably one of the most highly addictive chemicals out there, with all the stuff that they put into those cigarettes, and we don't even know what they put into, what kind of chemicals they put into that stuff. You're not smoking straight tobacco off the leaf. You're smoking a chemically treated leaf.
Yeah, exactly. You're smoking a plethora of other compounds and substances. Interestingly, we did health and safety training for Product Earth, which is the UK's largest cannabis event. They did a 3-day expo down in the south, and part of that we learned how the average white paper, the chalk produced white paper that's a cigarette paper, contains 33 chemical compounds known to be addictive in and of themselves, that are only added because they are also addictive in themselves. So it's the plethora and the combination of these things. And you're entirely correct to highlight those 3, but I would also add a 4th, and that is sugar. I often quip that here in the UK that most people's first dealer is Haribo, because your mum and your dad, they develop that addiction in you, so you'll behave. Same with like McDonald's, any of these other things that then have additive preservatives, things that we know are there to improve snackability, tastiness, long-lasting flavor, all of these other Orwellian manipulations of language, which are meaning, no, you're creating something that artificially remains longer so the body craves it, no matter how you want to disguise it. And it's that thing of, well, if you behave, you'll get your bag of sweets, or if you're really good at the end of the week, we'll take you to McDonald's. And you're manipulating that behavior for the reward of a chemical. And that's the dangerous thing. And we're all trained into that because that's good for capitalism. It means that you do it yourself. So you go, oh, I've worked really hard today, I'm going to go eat that Snickers, Mars, insert chocolate bar, or whatever, you know what I mean? And we train ourselves into it, and then we have a drop off from the sugar or from the caffeine or from whatever, and we then go to other substances, and we just end up maneuvering ourselves through these kind of chemical, I don't want to say comas, but we're just dampening ourselves with all of these things. Whereas cannabis and natural psychedelics, especially these natural psychedelics like DMT and LSD, they're non-compoundary. They kind of kick you out. You get your experience, and then you try and take more, and it doesn't compound. The receptors don't ingest the compound. You won't get higher. You get what you get if you're lucky to get it. And by their nature, they're not going to lead to the same consequential issues. And we're starting to see people like using MDMA that are then again quitting smoking. People microdosing with psilocybin, having the same cessation rates of nicotine patches and things like that they're reducing the combustion, but they're getting out of the nicotine. So they're actually breaking that cycle rather than changing the byproduct. I mean, look at the nicotine vape market. That's just transferring the addiction. It's not addressing it.
Yeah, I like to say addictive personalities. There's some people just have those addictive personalities, and if they get caught up in pills or whatever it is, and it's just you know what I'm saying, it's the same thing with alcohol and I guess food and sugar, and I guess anything across the board. If you got an addictive personality, it doesn't have to be drugs. It can be food. It could be a lot of other things.
I think you could almost use addictive personality here as a pseudonym for sort of traumatized human, or for, I don't want to say damaged in a pejorative way, but like a person that has been kind of harmed by life and is absent something. So they are seeking to fill it. I can't remember which poet described it as, the God hole, and that most people, they will plug it with religion, will plug it with relationships or sexual friendships or sexual relationships or friendships. food, whatever. And it is that we're all on this bell curve spectrum, and some of us just have spikes in areas because they give us either the neurochemicals that we're missing, or they act as surrogates for something that we didn't get when we were younger, or in balancing out. I mean, the complex psychology here is massive, and we're only just starting to understand this. And I think, again, it's a wonderful thing why we have the legacy industry in cannabis and all drugs, the people that in the face of prohibition have sought to do our own research, that have sought to take the autonomy and authority back for our healthcare, to go, I have an issue, I've learned about a thing online, I can access a thing, I'm going to go and try the thing. And I think that is part of the healing. That is part of the journey to self-actualization, as Maslow described it, as the pinnacle of what it is to be human, to be able to be in control of our own destiny and fate. And yeah, I hope more states in the same way that we're now seeing. I think it's 22 states that are now rec, whatever it is, the number it's up to. No, I think it's less. No, yeah, it will be 22. I think it is. That more states then follow suit with this, with the natural psychedelics, because I think we'll end up with more compassionate governance, more compassionate populations, and hopefully a calming of, as you speak of, this sort of emerging culture war and this like binary fight between the left and the right.
Yeah, and I think, there's a lot of people that have suffered a lot of trauma, and seen a lot of horrible things in their life. And, when something like that happens to you, you're never the same person, and then you're always and, for whatever reason that it happened or whatever, it happened. And when something horrible happens to you, you live with that with the rest of your life. And so there's certain things that you got to do to, to get yourself through that. And, that's part of the struggle, I think. And that's what, leads people to addiction. And, there's something inside that's just, just not right. And, some people can never fix it, and they bring it to their grave. And so it's a matter of realizing in your head, and trying to take the right corrective actions to do what you got to do to be right, and everyone's got a different psychological makeup, and all of that comes into play, and how you were brought up and how you lived your life and everything. And so depending on where you are, there's been, the world is not kind, and when you travel around and see other countries, and you don't realize how lucky you really are when people are, struggling to eat a meal every day, so you kind of, you count your blessings on that, in that regard, but, to have to live a life of struggle, and, eventually I think it just, psychologically, it just, it affects you, and yeah. The more you're exposed to it, the more I think you're going to be affected. But you could have one traumatic incident that could stay with you for the rest of your life. So it's, it's really hard to say.
Yeah, I look forward to a world where this conversation is almost as clinical as you have a higher metabolism, therefore you need to take in more calories. It should be almost as clinical as that. You've had some trauma in your life. Yeah, we can offer therapies and whatever else, but there's also a line where the trauma becomes your personality, where some people are so traumatized by events or have been experienced to such prolonged trauma that it becomes intrinsic to their being, to who they are. And whatever those people feel they need to pacify that, obviously not to the point of self-detriment, I don't have an issue with. I'm an advocate for the ubiquitous descheduling of all drugs and the addressing of all trauma, because I believe you could sell diamorphine, heroin, at every street corner in a world where people aren't traumatized, and people would, maybe take some on a Friday night. That's it. that is it. It's again, we're now starting to underpin this idea of like chemical hooks and that these drugs are devils. And it's like, no, heroin, the same thing that is being injected on street corners, is being given to your gran when she breaks her hip in the hospital. One person ends up on the street and destitute and the other doesn't. And it's because of perception. Do you know what I mean? It's because of their access. They're still in pain. Your gran's pain is from a hip and the doctor can see that. They can't see the guy on the street's pain because he never had a stable home. He never felt that he was loved. He never felt connected, you know? And we get closer.
Yeah, it's hard to find your balance in life. It really is, you know. And sometimes the older you get, you finally find your balance. You know, you go through a lot of experimentation, trials and tribulations, just to go back to where you started from. At least I could only say that from my own personal experience, you know. But, you know, trying to tell someone that, you know, and then experiencing yourself, and, you know, sometimes you need, you know, you could tell someone till you're blue in the face, you know, but until they've experienced themselves, and then they really are, oh yeah, you were really right, you know. So I mean, that's just the way that it goes, is really trying to find your own self balance in life.
Exactly that. There's a quote here I think I'd like to kind of round this up on. It's from Richard Alper, who sort of changed his name to Ram Dass. And he said, we're all just walking each other home. And I think that's a beautiful sort of sentiment in this. We're all just traumatized little tadpoles in the pond trying to figure out what the hell is going on. And the more compassion we can provide and the more collective acceptance through the creation of social spaces that we can all populate, I think is what's going to change it. And that's what I'm really excited for with this next wave of sort of the movement to legalize, deschedularize, decriminalize, whatever we're going to term it, cannabis, because it's going to have to be the conversation around, we want pubs of cannabis. We want the social space. We want weed wherever we are. We want it out of these restrictive areas and into our daily lives. And I think that's going to be a very interesting battlefield that's going to be fought very soon.
Yeah, you know, the thing is, you know, the whole persona of it, you know, and, you know, when you get experienced people, you know, those are the people you don't have to, you know, they already know. The people you have to convince are the soccer moms and grandmothers and fathers, people who don't participate but feel threatened for some reason.
Yeah. And I think the more people that consume, the more people that normalize it, the closer we get to it. And I think we are gradually having these sorts of conversations. I think it's going to take a few more years of the big boy investors speculating that they can make tens of billions and become gods in this for it to die down and them lose interest. I think it's a shame that the crypto markets are crashing, because I was kind of hoping that a lot of them guys would just transfer over and this would leave cannabis to people that actually give a shit about cannabis, because it seems there are so few involved that are actually here for the longevity of the plant and not just for the short-term profiteering.
Yeah, unfortunately, with all of that, that's kind of stifled some of the investors, you know, people that want to start putting up money, invest in New York or whatever. You know, I've been in, you know, talks with, you know, several different people that have shown interest in my company, wanting to do some type of collaboration or business partnership. And, you know, everyone, you know, talks and then it just kind of fall off, you know, everyone wants to do it, but, you know, for whatever reason, can't get it done. It's gonna be hard, you know, these next couple of years. I think, you know, once, we get it, you know, federally legalized, I think is really important, to getting it off, deschedulizing it. Because it actually does have, you know, medical benefits, but, you know, none of that seems to be addressed. You know, I don't understand why Joe Biden won't, you know, just make it decriminalized, because Richard Nixon was the one that criminalized it. You know, he didn't send it to Congress. He just signed the paper and it was illegal. You know, now they're saying, oh, well, you know, Congress has got to pass it and everyone, and, you know,
yeah.
it's a political football, and as you're getting, into, the different parties, the Republicans, the Democrats, everyone's got their own angle on it. And, I just want what's right to be done, and that's not what's being done.
Yeah, man, exactly that. It feels that the way it's going with the Senate and Congress and everything else is they're refusing to bake the pie unless they all get a piece. And by the time it gets up to the president and it would be signed, nobody else outside of those rooms gets to make that money, gets that control. And it's that power grab game that we see with every resource throughout.
How many more states got to go legal? What, we got to get a majority of 26? Like what? Like, medically, we're way over that at this point. So, I don't see why it's still, on the descheduled list. If it's medically accepted in over half of the states in the country, it just doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, exactly. How can something both be a medicine and a dangerous drug? But yeah, it's an oddity in terms of the way it's marketed. I'm quite aware of the time here, JJ, so I think we're going to wrap up with my final question that I ask every guest, or I try to, but sometimes I forget. What does the future hold for you?
I'm hoping opportunity. I just want an opportunity to compete. I don't have to be the biggest. I just want to be able to have my own little niche piece of the market. I don't need to be the biggest. I feel that my brand has substance. It can have the potential to be one of the biggest if you're running on that. But, with corporate market everything corporate doesn't work that way. And unfortunately, cannabis going legal, you've brought all these other vultures into, because the only thing they're looking at is making money. These capitalist ventures that you were describing, the corporation model is to make more money every year. So if I made $1 million this year and I only made 900 the next year, that means I lost 100,000. I didn't make 900. I lost $100,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, they want to make 1 million into 2 million, 2 million to 3 million, and just keep that corporate ladder going up, which I don't really see that happening in a commodity cannabis market where, the prices fluctuate regionally and depending on the quality and the supply and demand and all that stuff. So, the only thing, I just want a chance to compete, and that's all I could ask for. If I fail, then, that'd be on me, but, yeah.
Well, for fingers crossed, that, something sort of arises that social equity someday means social equity in one of these regions, and you have an opportunity to go back to New York and New Jersey and participate in a market that your work helped build, frankly.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, that's home for me. I like living in Colorado, but, after 7-8 years of being away from family and friends, and don't get me wrong, I go back multiple times a year and everything. And, it makes all those occasions that much more special when you get together with friends. But, as you get older, you start to realize, the people you have around you and, friends and family, and, making money is great. Don't get me wrong. Everyone needs to make money, to survive. So you really got to try to find that balance of being able to work all of that together, and, it's kind of hard. It kind of sucks when you got to leave your home to go somewhere else to work because, of the laws or whatever. And,
Yeah.
and you got to do what you got to do to further yourself up. You know, if I didn't move, I probably wouldn't be in the same position that I am now, obviously, you know. So at the time, you know, it was a step backwards, I could kind of say, but over time, it's been 2 steps forward, you know. So, yeah, you just got to keep trying to, you know, further yourself and your opportunities, you know, and if you got to go where you got to go to make that happen, then that's what you got to do, unfortunately, you know. But, you know, as you get older, like I said, you know, all that, a lot of other stuff starts to become more important to you, you know.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I get that. I think that's a great way to end this. So I wanted to say again, thank you for dedicating a chunk of time here and for coming on to this little podcast of mine. I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and it's been a pleasure, man.
No, I appreciate you having me on, and I always enjoy, you know, talking to people, talking shop, you know, talking about the industry, and, you know, trying to get the information out there, and just trying to make things better for everyone overall. You know, I want someone to have the same opportunity that I'm looking for down the road, you know. So
yeah, pay it forward. Yeah, I get that, man. I get that. Well, on that note, then I will include some links as well below. So if anyone's got any sort of questions and queries, that they can sort of reach out to you. I'll also include obviously links to the Top Dawg Seeds website as well. And yeah, thank you very much, JJ. It has been a pleasure, and I'll be in touch shortly to obviously let you know when this is released. But I'm going to say goodbye because I'm desperate for the toilet.
All right. Yeah, definitely link me up and I'll post that. You know, I'll get that post out there, and then some of my people can link on to you, you know, get onto your channel. And you know, maybe see some of your other guests as well, and, you know, try to get you some followers. So I'm definitely, you know, would like to, you know, help you as much as you help me.
I appreciate that, brother. I appreciate that a lot. Right. It's been a pleasure. I'm literally going to hit pause now and go and run for a piss.
Yep. Have a great day.
Great to meet you, JJ. Peace, man. Bye.
Okay. Bye.
Damn, that was necessary. That was needed. Apologies for the faces I've been pulling for the past 10, 15 minutes toward the end of that podcast there. I was, I think I drank far too much coffee and water today and couldn't sit still for 2.5 hours. I hope you've managed to sit still for 2.5 hours. Not that I'm going to mark you. I'm not a judgmental teacher over here. But I hope you've made it all the way through this podcast. If you have, that means you've maybe enjoyed it. If you have, please do give us a like, a share, and a subscribe. Do check us out on all social media platforms at The Simpa Life. Check us out on patreon.com/The Simpa Life, where for less than a cup of coffee a week, or a pint, or a bacon sandwich, or whatever your preference may be a week, you can help me keep the many lights on this project. Great guest. You guys are awesome. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with Mary Biles. Fingers crossed. I think it's Mary Biles. I haven't got the note. That's why I normally do the toss the papers in the air thing. But I'm pretty sure it's Mary Biles. If it's not, it's going to be a surprise guest to both of us. So check it out. Peace and love, folks. See you next week.